welcome to another episode of DisrupThis. DisrupThis, as you know, is a series of conversations which are especially focused towards how the landscape is changing, especially around product experience, customer experience, AI experience. And we have an opportunity of having conversations with seminal leaders and their perspectives around what could be done. So today we have the opportunity of speaking with Gaurav Lal. Gaurav is a dear friend and at the same time a very seminal UX leader in the industry with about 24 years of experience in building products, both from the service side, but actually on the product side as well, where he's done hardcore product building himself. He brings tremendous experience into this conversation as well. He's also an award-winning designer. In fact, his entire team has won an award, which is a Global Fortuna Award, which is with regards to experience excellence. And maybe Gaurav can talk a bit more about what he's done in that. Currently, he is the UX head for RateGain, and would love to hear a bit more from you, Gaurav, about what your journey has been like.
Amber, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm very excited. So in terms of the journey, I've got, like the way you said, Amber, I've got about 24 years experience. Worked for products and services. Have been doing consulting. I did for a lot of the banking companies, tech companies, and hardware, and so on and so forth. Currently with RateGain as the head of department, where RateGain is a travel tech company, and we are a SaaS based, and there is a lot of data that we provide to our tech support companies, like a lot of the hotels and cruise liners and etc. So the interesting part would be to how do you simplify that? How do you make the entire data set simple so that it can be consumed with ease? So that is what I do. And yes, I recently the team won the Fortuna Global Excellence Award. This was just to recognize the amount of work that I have done, and it's been a very interesting experience. So thank you, Amber. Yeah.
Congratulations for that, Gaurav, and very
Yeah.
well deserved.
Thank
So
you.
it's a pleasure to speak with you because till a point of time, Gaurav and I used to work together as well. And we have many stories that we had. So this is especially a dear conversation in that context. So, Gaurav, what do we speak about today?
Yeah,
Besides a journey together, what do we speak about today?
Yeah, no. So the world is going through this AI, and there are a lot of these questions about how does it change the space around UX and all of that. So that is one. Or if you have any specific questions around what are people asking for, consultating point of view, then we can discuss that as well. Yeah.
No, I think it's a fantastic area to speak about. Well, and AI has been on my mind and my company's mind as well. And we've been exploring this from different perspectives and talking to different leaders. And AI and its impact on UX, I think it's definitely something which needs to be addressed. And let's less towards giving tips to designers in terms of what tool to use, but more as advisory to management that how should they even look at this? How should they? Because there was a point of time where UX became very central, became a core practice or a core ability required inside companies. And we were really happy about that because the recognition had been achieved. But there's potentially some amount of confusion going on in this field with regards to what AI is doing. So I think that's a great topic to talk about. And
yeah, no, I would agree. One, fairly, because AI is fairly new. A lot of companies do not understand it is just it is in that fad moment that everybody has to try it out. And some take it as fear, some take it as, hey, this is a great thing to do. Purely from a UX point of view, I think it's a great tool, I would say, which would help the designers to think more, think deeper. So there, from a UX process point of view, the AI will not be able to replace that, because there's a lot of thinking around, who is the user, what are the task flows, what are the pain areas. In the past, Amber and I would, sit down and be part of those interviews, which would take a lot of time just to understand those subtle things that the user is trying to say, which is yes or no, or the pain areas and all of that. So those will be still there. Now, what can AI help? It can make the UX person think more like a product, think broadly more, deeper more. And then the execution part, which is, creating the wireframe and stuff like that, that can be even better and much more polished, because it used to be a struggle to make sure everything is very pixel perfect and all of that, especially between the design and the front end layer. Now the front end layer, because you'll have full control, the front end dev can be just pixel perfect. So that is my take at it, Amber. What is your thought?
I think I'm going to bring some more provocative questions to our conversation here.
Yeah, okay.
Because there is a conversation that designers have offline versus what people say on social media or what they actually talk in the public forum. I think it's important to address some of those different things. And of course, the views that Gaurav and I share are our own views. They're not representation of our companies anyway. But I think it's important to bring those tables, starting with, I would say, the myth that AI would replace the need for user interface based interactions. And we've been through eras of first, everything was very manual, but had to do things. You want to pay a bill, you have to go and stand in line here. I'm like, you and I have done that. We have stood in lines to go and buy milk and groceries. We have done all those things. And then from there, it came to a point where everything became very call center support. Everything was call center. Everything you can call. There was a warm body you can throw at that problem. You can do that. Then it went to a DIY kind of approach. You can do IVRs and USSDs. You and I work with clients in South Africa, large banking clients in South Africa, where it was all just about transforming that. And then from there, it was this entire era of mass UI-ification. Everything should be UI-ified, which is where the UX field became really front and center because everything had to be UI-ified. Now the point is that everything that had to be UI-ified will become AI-ified. And thus, which is why there is no need for user experience as an approach to doing things. What's your thought about that? I got some thoughts, but love to hear your thoughts, man.
That is very interesting. I think AI-fied, I think right now the AI-ification is largely on the process side. Now, a task flow which used to take maybe 10 clicks or 10 steps, or it was a mix of online and offline, that process automation in terms of with the help of AI, that can happen. User interface, I think it will still be required. People have, like the way you said, people have always dreamt about that case where I can just speak to a machine and it just does it. So we have not reached that stage, number one. And secondly, people are used to of certain screens, and because the screens and the interface is so simple, like if you have to transfer money, it is just a swipe away, or you just have to punch in your pin and you're done. Now if you create a chatbot around it, transfer money to Amber so and so, you just have to type in, there might be a spelling error and stuff like that. So not everything needs a chatbot or an AI, and not everything needs the intelligence also. I mean, some things like a website, like a brochure website, it is good the way it is. I think the intelligence is in the process, the flow of it. How do you make it smarter? How do you make it better? That originates from the UX thinking.
Yeah.
The AI can strengthen it by giving its own version. Now, its own version might not be the always accurate one, but it can support that. Hey, have you thought of this and this also? So that is what I think. It can give you a peripheral view, but at the end of the day, the UX guy will have to do that entire process thinking.
It's such a important point you brought up, Gaurav, and we should talk about that part. So I caught one part of what you said, and let's talk about that. So the fact that everything will not be a chatbot.
Yeah.
It's so fundamentally important to talk about this, to teach this, to market this, because this is a broad level perception which is coming out. The fact that any task or any human interaction can be done with an NLP based approach. NLP based means either we are speaking and something happens, or we're typing and something happens. Frankly, human beings were not designed to do everything via conversation. A conversation is an evolutionary aspect of being the human animal, which happened over time, but that's not everything. If you have to throw a spear at something, you can't say, please throw a spear. And, by the time the lion has already eaten you. So I think that's important to do that. And that fallacy in understanding that all forms of human interaction will have to suddenly become conversation based. Everything has to be conversation. And we went through an era of conversational UX as well. All of that, I think that is the fundamental fallacy which needs to be addressed, because the birth of LLMs, or the advent of LLMs into the mass context has pushed this idea. Everything will be conversation based. Higher CX will become conversation based. You just talk to people and do that. And recently, we're looking at some example by some payment company where they were saying that now merchants which are using this payment ability, now they can ask them their balance, monthly balance or whatever the current balance is. Why just show it?
Yeah,
So,
interesting.
force fitting this in all aspects of interaction, I think is not the right way of doing things. And I think each ability, each interaction ability has got its place in the CX. And any business, when they're delivering this, needs to understand there is always going to be hybrid, it's going to be a combination of things. And fundamentally, you have to see what's best for the human that you're trying to sell to.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
human at the center, how do you actually build for that? How do you ensure that what's the best interaction to make them do something or to sell them something, and which creates business outcomes? I think that's the right way of doing things. Then uh, an overwhelming direction of the entire company that we should become fundamentally a chatbot company.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to your thought, because I come from an ad background and we used to do media planning, right? A combination of posters and radio and TV and etc. etc. So when you said hybrid, I mean, when you're thinking of a CX, which is a complete end-to-end experience from all the customer touch points, from how do I find the company to the salesperson to the conversation that the salesperson is having, how does he or she onboard the product, use the product, give the feedback, either good or bad, and so on and so forth. Now, for not for everything I can put a chatbot, right? It will have to be a combination, a hybrid. So if I am looking for if I'm starting my own company, let's say, and if I want to build a website, because website is required, if somebody wants to know what the business Gaurav Lal is into, they would go to my website or to my LinkedIn profile and so on and so forth. So all these touch points are very, very important. I can't just rub them, clean the entire slate, put the internet, all these websites and LinkedIn's of the world and Instagrams of the world down and just say, here is my Gaurav Lal chatbot. Just go and interact with this. That will not happen. So we need to use the intelligence where the intelligence is required. We can't just make everything intelligent, and it is not even required.
The example that Gaurav Lal chatbot is so interesting, Gaurav. I wanted to say that is because I've seen people do that. I've seen people on LinkedIn come up and say, "Oh, I made a chatbot, which is me, basically a clone of me and my way of thinking, etc." Anybody can now download the GPT and fundamentally interact, and the output is going to be the same. I think that there's so many things wrong in that way of thinking because the technology, what it does, I think people need to go deeper. It's a content, it's a pixel protection engine. I think people understand fundamentally what technology is. And secondly, that, this conversationalization of every single interaction model doesn't really make sense. It's not human. And from the point that advent of technology itself, 200 years, 300 years, largely the transition that we've been seeing, human is not involved. Human is pretty much the same. Their needs are the same. The way they visually process, the way they cognitively process, fundamentally, all those things have not changed. So you have to still build around that. The technology that can be used to service and deliver to that human, that has changed. That is evolving very fast, very fantastically. But our abilities are fairly limited. And we have to understand that, and we have to build services around that and not assume one thing. I think the overwhelming marketing push around LLMs creates that confusion, lack of depth of understanding of technology. In fact, AI is a collection of technologies. There are hundreds and thousands of AI technologies, ranging from computer vision to up to large language and SLM models around there. People need to understand that. So, with a superficial understanding, if you approach the subject, you would obviously come up with, let's put a chatbot.
Yeah, yeah. No, you rightly said, because it is, I think the AI is, at the time when internet was just, I think, launched, everybody wanted to build a website, so right now everybody is talking about let's build a chatbot because they don't have the real use case of whether I will be able to solve any problem, or just because it is gimmicky, it is nice thing to have. My friend has it, so I should also have it. We are at that stage. There a better sense of, like, the way we had during the internet times. There was a use case. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
I don't have to stand in the long queues. Now I can transfer funds from sitting at home via the internet. That is a use case to solve, right?
Yeah.
For AI, the use case, there is no clear. See, with AI, you have to think of the outcome. That, hey, AI, I want to achieve this outcome, and it does it. Now, right now, the stage at which it is in, I have to tell everything. The prompt engineering is becoming a new skill now.
Yeah.
Right? I have to tell the damn thing, each and everything. You are this, you do this, and then it pukes out something.
In fact, there's increased work, Gaurav. I think instead of reducing work, it's increased work. The amount of typing you have to do, the amount of prompting you have to do to make the technology do anything close to what you were doing before has increased. And that's the interesting next area that has it really improved the UX process, because some of the seminal guys in our field are saying that the old UX process is gone. The steps that we followed with regards to understanding and then empathize and come up with concepts and iterate and all those things is fundamentally gone. AI will do everything in that context. What's the experience on that?
Yeah, there was recent reports also. A lot of the products which were just AI based only, which were just somebody does not understand UX and they made something. A lot of them have failed because what AI and I have used it. AI builds into that context, but at a very broad scale. When you're building a website, a dashboard, or you're trying to solve somebody's problem, it is a very clean, niche, thin task flow, and that becomes your scope of work. What AI does, its scope of work is so thick. It'll add so many functionalities, so much of noise that I have to sit down and remove all of that. So it becomes an additional work, right?
That's such an important point. Yes. Before you go further on that point, I think we should talk a bit more about that. What is it doing? It's looking at some examples across the world and giving you an aggregate sandwich version based on what your prompt is. It's not solving your business problem. It's giving you an average potentially design or average potential experience out there.
Correct.
Is that serving the purpose?
Correct. You're absolutely right. It's giving me a standard set of design, which if I launch it the way it is, it will become like a template. You and I will have the same things. But for us to personalize and to understand what the problem is and how do I solve it, a UX skill is very, very important. I have seen outcomes from a person who is not a UX and a person who is UX, there's a world of difference. Not purely from the aesthetics point of view, but how you've approached the problem and how you solved it.
Exactly.
And there is so we are trained to empathize. People think that we just, why are we taking so much time and all of that? Because we are understanding we're empathizing what the problem is. If somebody says, I want to change the button color from green to blue, we'll not just go and change the button from green to blue. We want to understand what does blue mean.
Correct.
And if you tell this to an AI, it would just simply just change it without understanding the behavior, the context. Is green a bad color because there was an association of green with something, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, UX, you might not take that much time, but you have to process every stage in your head, into your working and all of that. That is very, very important. I mean, there's a huge difference between what we make and what AI can.
Well, and then it comes to a fundamental question that the perception in the market is, UX is creativity. It's like a magic box. You give this team something and they do something creative and comes out. And then that creativity will lead to some potential business outcome. We don't know what happened. And that is it. And it's more about aesthetics and putting buttons and stuff together. And that's how people think about it. Whereas, you're in my experience, it's a science. It's a science. It's more of a technical skill where it's a thinking and strategizing skill. How do you do strategy of making a behavior happen? That's fundamentally what we do. The UI is an outcome, a rendition of that fundamentally. And it's important for the industry to understand that, because this is how probably we differ from fashion design. This is probably how we differ from furniture design or exhibition design, etc. Because it's less of expression of creativity. It's not an expressionist kind of field. It's actually a very technical field. It's a business building field. In fact, it should be, instead of calling it UX design, it should be experience engineering or strategy, something, because that's what we do.
Correct.
And for folks who are focused on Figma outputs and how many scenes are coming out, etc., they'll lose the point that this is fundamentally what we are doing. And I've seen a challenge in this area. With the LLMs and the chatbots, the perception with the practitioners in this field is that it can do this thinking for them also, which I think is highly dangerous.
Yeah, I think, like the way you said, I think this is an interesting point, and I have also discussed it. But like the way we discussed earlier, the thinking that AI does as a UX practitioner is that standard model. But the beauty of UX is to get into the context, right? Of Amber needs something, but his need is very different to my need. Right now, what AI would do, it will create a middle line and say, if both are this and this is the standard line, which is UX does not work like that. You have to understand the behaviors in a much more deeper way, but it gives a good, maybe a reference point. So I will say AI is a good friend to have. If you have this skill to make your friend work well, then it is a good friend. But it cannot. Can it do my work? No, because there's a lot of thinking that goes in my head, and then I prompt it, and then it works.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, right now, like a good pet to have.
Yeah, it's a supporting tool. It helps you with data crunching. It helps you with information processing and making sense of things. It helps you with that. But the part about creating a strategy which is contextual to a business,
Correct.
and how do you create behaviors which help a product succeed, that is something this is not going to do, because it's all about generating aggregate data from across different examples across the world and that. And I think that difference is important. I think practitioners should not be relying on this to do the thinking work. I think that's very critical. Then the other myth which has come to table, and I'll bring to that, is the fact that you can get something called synthetic users. I've seen a lot of companies do this, where they've taken personas and then they've given it to their chatbot and say, please pretend to be XYZ person, and then now look at this design and give me feedback based on. What's your views on that?
Yeah. See, a synthetic customer will give you synthetic answers, and your end UI will also look a UI which does not understand your customer. So it might do 20-30% of the task well, but rest of it might fail. See, understanding customer is a psychology. It is a very deep. You have to be very well trained to understand. So Amber and I, in a certain company, we used to sit down for hours listening into customers, their subtle behaviors like a frowning face, and those silent pauses and all of that. So again, you can, if you are short of time and all, you can take a reference. I'm saying AI is at a reference point only. To make good UX, if you want to differentiate your product line across the world, because you also have to remember we're living in an over communicative times. There's just too much of communication. So if you want to differentiate a good UX, which is thought by a good UX practitioner, you can use AI to get a reference check or something like that. But that is not, you cannot replace a good research. My God, it used to be my high point. The kind of things that we used to learn about behaviors, how customers are looking at the task flow, we might have thought of it very differently only.
Correct.
Those were such interesting things, Amber.
Yeah, and that's important. You said that the way we thought about it and what customer did was so different.
Yeah.
I think that was always the magic moment.
Correct.
The whole act of understanding the fact that your customers think differently. There is serendipity at play. Customer behavior is not documented. That itself was very fundamental to the process. And what I'm hearing, at least in this myth, is that you can replace that fundamentally and have these synthetic users. I think it is an outcome of something which I call air-conditioned product building. And slowly, companies are falling prey to this, that how can you do everything sitting in your air-conditioned room or your class cabin and come up with solutions for things, whereas there's a lot of hard work required to go out to the field, look at customer behavior, see how they're reacting to their products, and making changes in that. And in the air-conditioned product building context, it was a blessing to get these chatbots, which gives you a significant pretense of intelligence and pretense of the fact that, oh, that's a real user who's looking at your product. But is that validation is very risky.
And plus, the fundamental of AI is it is always working on a data which is in the past, right? So if it by somehow knows customer patterns for a commerce site, But those are patterns which have happened in the past. In the times that we live in, there are so many different pressures and the behaviors are changing. There are certain wars happening. There are a lot of shifts. And because of which the behavior change. Now, how will the AI know it? Because AI only feeds on the data which is in the past, right? So your research is very, very much required just to stay relevant. What is the latest? Yes, if you want to base your product basis the past, you might take a reference that guy did it, and hence I'm doing it. Might not work, might work. So if you want to take a second guess and build it, you can, but it does not work like that.
Definitely, but in the area of processing outcome from these interviews, note taking,
Yeah.
some of that processing, if I remember, that is a lot of time for us. Maybe potentially there, this can help. So the supplemental tool to aid some of those steps, it helps practitioners, but to replace such fundamental things, to replace the fact that the thinking part,
Yeah.
you're asking it to come up with your strategy and solve your work, basically saying that do my job while I get paid.
Yeah.
Right? Or asking it to, create synthetic users and I will do testing right here sitting in my room instead of actually interacting with people. I don't think a healthy practice is to building products, and products will suffer. If this is the philosophy which people build, products will suffer. The third interesting myth, when we have both seen both sides of it, because we've had careers in services and product, and we've seen that, is the fact that with the UX tools, it will reduce costs for what a UX practice would cost. Manpower, reduction of head. How much time will you do things in? Now, you can do everything overnight. You can launch everything overnight. Are there risks in this thinking approach that you see? No, I completely understand, because that is, we are moving in times which is very fast based. Like when I was a child, my mother used to say, have your milk quickly. And literally that quickness has been built into the business now, that everybody wants to do it very fast, because the landscape is very competitive. You want to launch a product first and all of that. So I completely get it that the GTM is very fast now. Now, so one cannot just speed it up all the time. See, if you want to do a concept test, whether this kind of thing that we want to launch, and does it work or not, you might create something dirty and then launch and see. But if you're serious about your business and product, you have to put in that kind of thinking into it. Yeah. So that it stays relevant for a much longer time. Because if you've half baked it, then it'll remain half baked. So that is very important. And sorry, I forgot your last question point. Largely, you've covered it, and we both agree the fact that, see, you cannot drastically reduce the manpower. Yeah. Required to do UX work. Yeah. And I think it's not a very productive way of thinking about this, considering the fact that humanity is about enabling humanity. I have a lot of associations with different universities, and now they're having challenges with placing design students, because the philosophy in companies are changing, that everything is cheaper, you don't require manpower. But you do. The number of people required to do the UX process is not reduced. Correct. Yeah. So from a purely manpower point of view, I think the way we are right now, I don't think reduction. See, what we are, I think you and I are trying to make the point that there is a lot of thinking which is still required. And for thinking right now, only humans can think. Maybe in 10, 12, 15 years down the line, maybe something else can think more. But where we are right now, the humans can think. So if the businesses want products which are thought out well, you need humans. And hence, but if you want something that is quick and just randomly built and all of that, then please try it with AI. Yeah, risk it. Risk those POCs and see what happens in that, and why there is a certain process which was built and certain competence skills which is required to deliver this. This is not a Figma problem here. Yeah. No. UX is not a Figma problem. It's a thinking discipline. It's a strategy discipline, and which is why there is a significant difference between practitioners in this field who understand this versus Figma operators. Absolutely. For me, in fact, Figma was the last thing to do.
So for me, the most important thing is to understand the problem, the context, the users. It is the most fundamental problem which I see the industry, they understand the surface of it and they just want to quickly just go and solve it because they want to shine in front of the boss or something or something or something. But the more you understand the problem, the better you can solve. And as an output of it is your Figma file.
Correct.
So if you've thought it well, you'll be able to solve well, and hence your wireframes become much more faster because you're not thinking about where should my navigation, where should the search button be, should it be on the top, left, right, center, where, right? If you've thought it well, you'll be able to build it very fast.
On a lighter note, Gaurav, I remember that you and I started our career by designing in PowerPoint.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I do.
We've been through everything. We've been through PowerPoint to, I don't know, OmniGrapher and Axior and Sketch and now Figma. And, this may transition at different points of time as well. Our love for the software is not that strong. Let's put it that way. What I remember is that even when we were building things via PowerPoint, the business impact was still massive.
Absolutely.
We were generating massive business impact, designing things via PowerPoint. So it's less about the production ability. It's more about the strategy and the thinking behind that. And it's a science field. And that's why it's important for companies to understand this aspect and be less associated of this as a production problem, Figma-based production problem.
Absolutely, Amber. I think if I think I would say if you think out well and execute well. So a UX guy will go through the process and build a very good wireframe which is solving the business problem, the customer problem. The sales will go up, your training costs will go down, your repeat business will go up and all of that. But that is also with the underline that it is built well, right? The right databases, right integration, loading time, those are subtler aspects which might get mixed, left out because of constraints of time and all of that. I think besides AI, one has to worry about those. How are you executing it so that what you vision for is getting translated completely? I feel in this world of MVPs, MVP is so misused right now. People just because they don't want to work more, they say we'll just do it this much in phase one and rest is phase two. But the customer does not care, what is your phase one and phase two. He wants the entire experience. And the experience is a front end and a back end both tied together very well, and that becomes the experience. I think the world should be talking about that. AI is not, it's a good friend pet right now to have. That's about it.
In fact, I relabeled MVP for my clients and calling it minimal value product.
Yeah, exactly.
Focus on value. At least this much value is required to be given to your customers for you to get business advantage. What is that?
Seriously, man.
Don't focus on viability, focus on value.
That is so important. I mean, it is so misused right now just because of time, budget, just package something quickly and just deliver. It is,
Yeah, this faster, cheaper, better movement, it's a risk. It's a risk for product building. And AI, I think, is only a symptom, one symptom to this product building way of thinking of that. And I think companies need to move away from that, need to understand that faster always is not better. Something which is well thought out, well structured, more cohesively across teams will deliver tremendous more better as compared to something which you did very fast.
No,
so
correct. I think so. You might do it faster and cheaper, but one ends up coming back to the problem again and again. The companies they would launch it fast and they'll feel happy. Hey, we did it. But then after 6 months, then the clients would start to trim. They will come back to the table. Hey, this was not thought out well. Why didn't you spend more time? They spend a lot more money. Yeah. Eventually, in the short term. So if you have a short side, you will feel very happy that I did it cheaper and faster. But in the long term, the same company will spend a lot more money.
Correct. Yeah. This whole shift from SDLC to Agile was everything being fast. How fast can we ship features?
Yeah.
I've seen products, Gaurav, which have crazy amount of features. And they're saying, okay, we have so many features. Still, we have customer attrition. They're not using it. We don't have engagement, etc. Because you're not solving those problems.
Mm.
You're solving engineering production problems. And the moment we start looking at UX as a field, as a production field as well, and we're saying, okay, how can we do this faster? Automatically, that becomes a problem. So, coming back to AI, and its impact in UX with regards to production as well, what I've seen is, yes, it can help move designers towards better quality production, not necessarily faster. A lot of things which had to be taught previously, where we had to focus on alignments and padding, etc. Some of the production related things around it. This is not the main part of our field. Those things become easier. Put a prompt in Figma Make and align things across the entire design system, or make one change across this. So global level changes, etc. Those things become faster. Asking Figma Make to create a conversion journey, which will do better. That's risky. So anyway, sorry, you're saying?
No, correct. So I've used Figma Make. So the kind of problems that we're discussing, I have done it so that I could validate. So I have created persona using Figma Make. I've done customer journeys, but I realized that it is giving me a standardized template, and hence I felt good that that as a UX practitioner, the AI is not there. Like it is a good reference point. It can help me to product thinking. There might be some visual things that I left out, but the entire process and science of it is a lot of science. I mean, people don't maybe appreciate, but there's a lot of science to every pixel that you put on the screen. The color contrast, the Gestalt principles, and there are tons of it, but there's a lot of science. Yeah.
That's a very fundamental point, Gaurav, that you're making, that positioning this discipline as a fundamental scientific and technical approach for delivering business outcomes is far more important than subjective creativity at the end of that. And I think whether it's practitioners who are looking to learn this field, they should focus towards that. But I think to conclude this conversation, it's been a very interesting conversation, but you and I can go on and on that. It's important for us to leave, I think, some takeaways, not just for designers. They've got enough people talking about this, use this tool and do that, etc. But I think a takeaway for company management, how should they approach UX over the next 5 years? Because this is where they're being impacted the most. This is where they're feeling pressures that how they can reduce costs and maybe AI can do this better, etc. This is what's going on inside the mind. And I think if people like you and I with 20 plus years of experience, we can give some guiding light in that context that this is how you should think about it. If you want to gain business outcomes from doing this kind of work, then how should they think about that? I think those are some quick points to leave.
No, this is very, very fundamental. And I would say one, AI is a very new thing. It is like a kid right now. So don't just bank on it a lot. Secondly, if you want to sustain in the industry for a long time with the products that you have, the product thinking, the UX thinking has to be there. Just building something and launching for it to just fail loses a lot of brand reputation, trust in the company, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some examples where some kids have launched some of the products. It has done well. It has fetched billions of dollars and stuff. So every CEO feels that I should be also be doing something like. Well, they just got lucky, right? Or they would have thought about their product very, very well. They just shared that I did it in just 5-10 days, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that product thinking is very, very important, that entire UX journey. So invest in right product thinking. The product is a combination of UX, the front end, and the back end. If all of these three layers work the best, product is not just a great interface that you see, how well it works also. It is oiled well, it works fast, it can take load and scale up, scale down, and all of that. Invest in that. Your products will automatically sell. You'll have to spend less in sales, less in marketing, because the product is so good that people will talk about it. People will share it. So invest in that, and not in just that I will launch 5 new features or 10 new products every month or every year, stuff like that.
I agree with you. And my critical takeaway to share in this context was, don't focus on speed and reduction of manpower.
Yeah.
That's not the objective here, because a product which is built well, the ROI is so exponential at the end of it that these things don't matter. Small amount of manpower saving here, etc., doesn't really add value. And the field that UX is all about, It's about thinking, it's about science, it's about strategy. And this requires people, it requires a correct process for doing that. AI will supplement it, but the correct way of building this is to build a proper practice for yourself in your company or engage a services company which can provide that kind of abilities to you. The number two, and the last thing that I think I would like to leave with that is be careful of AI myths. There's so many myths out there. It's very important to be careful for company management, replacing actual users with a synthetic AI, making AI do the thinking for building your strategies are very risky areas. And important not to fall into these traps because the impact on your product, impact on the business can be significant. And you'll only realize this a year later or 2 years later once you build in this direction and see what's happening. And by that time, it can be fatal for the business on that. But I think Gaurav, fantastic conversation.
Thanks very much.
This was great, and it was a pleasure to speak with you. But I think great critical takeaways for business builders to think about how to engage with UX and what it can do for them and where AI lies in that context. Thank you for this fun and fantastic conversation. Everyone who's watching, please reach out to Gaurav directly on LinkedIn and other social forums. He's very approachable and answers everything,
Yeah.
as you can see in that. DisrupThis will keeping on more episodes, so stay tuned and follow us. Thank you for your time, Gaurav. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, Amber. Take care.